Hi, my name is Mindy Mandell, and this video is part of a series of videos on Proclus's Elements of Theology. I'll link the playlist here. But today's video is going to focus on propositions 123 through 127. Throughout this series, I am using the E.R. Dodds translation of the elements. So for those of you who don't have the text, there is a link in the description box for a PDF version. All right, well, let's get into the text. All of the propositions that I'm going to talk about today focus either on the transcendency of the gods, or on their providential immanence, or on how they function simultaneously as both transcendent and immanent. So with that in mind, let's take a look at proposition 123. All that is divine is itself ineffable and unknowable by any secondary being because of its supra-existential unity. But it may be apprehended and known from the existence which participate it. Wherefore only the first principle is completely unknowable, as being unparticipated. So we're looking here at the gods as transcendent, yet they are knowable in one sense and unknowable in another. This is reminiscent of proposition 100. And this proposition reads, every series of wholes is referable to an unparticipated first principle and cause, and all unparticipated terms are dependent from the one first principle of all things. So we are reminded that the head of each series is unparticipated, which remember is another way to say transcendent. Yet they in turn are transcended by the first principle. That same hierarchy is in place here. It is only the first principle that is completely unparticipated and so completely unknowable. Okay, let's take a look at the explanation. For all rational knowledge, inasmuch as it grasps intelligible notions and consists in acts of intellection, is knowledge of real existence, and it apprehends truth by an organ which is itself a real existent. But the gods are beyond all existence. This sentence is amazing. Rational knowledge here is actually gnosis, so it is not rational in the sense of discursive thinking, but in the higher sense, what some might call intuitive knowledge. So we're talking about the knowledge of real existence, as you see later in the sentence. And he tells us that truth is apprehended by an organ which is itself a real existent. So what truly is can be known by what truly is. As philosophers, we leave the proverbial cave not with the body, but by developing that part of us that is our essence, by that which truly is. But then he goes on to say, the gods are beyond all existence. And that was proposition 115. I will hop over to it for a second to refresh your memories on that one. This is the one that reads, every god is above being, above life, and above intelligence. So this is the one that introduces the gods as being supra-existential. Okay, I'll go back to proposition 123 to see what follows from this. He goes on to write, accordingly, the divine is an object neither of opinion, nor of discursive reason, nor yet of intellection. For all that exists is either sensible and therefore an object of opinion, or its true being and therefore an object of intellection, or it's of immediate rank, at once, being and a thing of process. and therefore an object of discursive reason. Those of you who have read The Republic may notice that opinion, discursive reason, and intellection are sections on Plato's famous divided line. So by saying that the gods cannot be an object of any of these, he is taking away all cognitive faculties, all epistemological avenues, if you will, to the gods. They are all unknowable. And intellection here, remember, is that higher mode of thinking, not discursive reasoning, but more in line with that intuitive knowledge. Okay, going on. If then the gods are supra-existential, or they have a substance prior to existence, we can have neither opinion concerning them, nor scientific knowledge by discourse of reason, nor yet intellection of them. But look at the turn he takes in the next paragraph. Nevertheless, from the beings dependent upon them, the character of their distinctive properties may be inferred, and with cogency. So the gods are not known directly, but they are known by inference. For differences within a participant order are determined by the distinctive properties of the principles participated. Participation is not of all by all, since there can be no conjunction of the wholly disparate. Neither is it a random connection, but to each cause is attached, and from each proceeds, that effect which is akin to it. So the gods are known through inference by the character of their particular order or series. And Proposition 29 was referenced in that paragraph. This is the law of similitude, that all procession is accomplished through likeness. And while I'm here, I do want to remind you of a few of the propositions that follow this one. Proposition 31, all that proceeds from any principle reverts in respect of its being upon that from which it proceeds. All reversion is accomplished through a likeness of the reverting terms to the goal of reversion. All that proceeds from any principle and reverts upon it has a cyclical activity. And one more. Everything whose nature is to revert, reverts upon that from which it derived the procession of its own substance. And all of this underscores the idea that the connection of a god to its series is not random. And so coming back to Proposition 123, we see that he wrote here as well that it is not a random connection, but to each cause is attached, and from each proceeds that effect which is akin to it. So Proclus focused here on the procession, but the inference is that if there is a likeness in the procession, it must be in the return as well. And this is why we can infer the character of a god through participation. This idea will come up again, by the way, when we get to Proposition 162. Now let's turn to Proposition 124. This is a very beautiful proposition, and it's one that is central to a number of spiritual systems. You might even consider this one a meditation. Let me go through it first, and then it'll become clear why I say this. So it reads, every god has an undivided knowledge of things divided, and a timeless knowledge of things temporal. He knows the contingent without contingency, the mutable immutably, and in general all things in a higher mode than belongs to their station. To show why this is so, Proclus is going to draw on Proposition 118. So before I jump into the explanation here, I want to quickly review that proposition. And this one reads, every attribute of the gods presubsists in them in a manner that is consonant with their distinctive character as gods. And since this character is unitary and it is above being, they have all their attributes in a unitary and supra-existential mode. So that's the key here, that the mode is unitary and supra-existential. Their knowledge is according to their own power and their own station in the hierarchy. And again, that station is unitary and supra-existential. And so taking what we just saw, the gods being unitary and supra-existential, we'll see what follows. And if the gods do have all their attributes in a mode that is consonant with their character as gods, again, unitary and supra-existential, it is surely manifest that their knowledge, being a divine property, will be determined not by the nature of the inferior beings which are its object, but by their own transcendent majesty. So this is what follows from Proposition 118. Accordingly, their knowledge of things pluralized and passible will be unitary and impassible. Passible, by the way, means passive. And he goes on to say, though its object be a thing of parts, yet even of such the divine knowledge will be undivided. Though its object be mutable, itself will be immutable, though contingent, necessary, and though undetermined, determinate. Determinate here means definite. For the divine does not get knowledge extraneously from its inferiors. Why then should its knowledge be restricted by the nature of its object? And so the picture that Proclus is painting is of the gods knowing things in a way that is appropriate to them. And now he's going to give us the other side of the equation, how we, from our limited perspectives and states of mind, see the gods. Those inferiors, on the other hand, have an indeterminate thought of the determinate divine nature and changing concepts of the immutable. Its impassibility they conceive in terms of passion, its timelessness in terms of time. For the lower can fall away from the higher, but that the gods should receive aught from their inferiors is a thing which may not be. And it's fitting that he did not call this knowledge. He only called it thoughts, and then he used words like concepts or conceive, because from that limited perspective, this is life in the cave. These are the cognitive faculties in the cave. So this is not knowledge. Picture a pond, the water, the ground, creations of nature. Trees and other plants grow and are nourished by the water and by the sun. There may be some simple pond creatures that have some sensations, but no thoughts. The frogs and the fish move and seek food. Perhaps some people visit the pond. These people can go beyond perceptions or sensations. They engage in thoughts and emotions. Those who are advanced in their philosophical practice can participate more fully in the realm of nous or intellect. But now let's go beyond even these people to unembodied intellects and ultimately to the gods. Now at each level in this visualization, from the water and the earth all the way to the gods, there is a certain experience of reality. It is only when we get to people that we even consider having an understanding of reality. And so Proposition 124 can only be applied to rational souls and above. Now consider for a moment the experience of the average person visiting this pond. This person can certainly understand their own level of experience. They can understand those levels subsequent to themselves, the moving animals, the plants, the ground, the water. Realms beyond, though, are mysterious and hidden. Those rare people who experience such realms are often called psychics, clairvoyants, mediums, and so on. Most of us do not have such experiences, at least not on a regular basis. Our own realm is infinite, and yet there are realms beyond our realm's infinity. Just as the frog lives in an infinite realm or dimension, yet our human experience of thought is a realm beyond the frog's infinity. This principle, by the way, was captured in Propositions 93 and 95. 93 read that all infinitude in things which have being is infinite neither to the superior orders nor to itself. For whomsoever anything is infinite, to him it is also uncircumscribed. You cannot put a limit on it. You cannot hold it. And so there's this idea of relative infinity. We saw it again in Proposition 95. The more unified potency is always more infinite than one which is passing into plurality. And so we see that each realm is more infinite than its subsequents. And this pond visualization is underscoring that all the realms are together, that we are part of this whole. There is no distance between realms. Think about it. How can there be? Reality itself is a unity. It is not broken up into time and space. Now, from our limited perspective, infinity itself, that infinite power of reality itself, it cannot even be conceived. The best that we can muster is a concept of infinite space. Eternity, too, is beyond our conception. So we compromise with the notion of the whole of time. Now we can understand conceptually that beyond our limited experience there is infinity and eternity, but it requires a shifting in state of mind to go beyond the conceptual into the direct knowing of the infinite and the eternal, because we, as separate individuals who live in physical form, exist in the realm of time and space. Time and space have a mode of existence that we are a part of, but they are not ultimate reality. The gods don't have such limitations. They are supra-existential, beyond even being. They do not need to limit themselves to these rudimentary concepts of space and time. For they do know infinity, and they do know eternity. And so this is why I say that Proposition 124 is a meditation. And it can open you to a contemplation of the myriad of implications that follow. Yeah, that was a heavy one. Drop me an email or put a comment below if you have any questions about it. Proposition 125 is kind of heavy too. This one reads, "From that station wherein he first reveals himself, every god proceeds through all the secondary orders, continually multiplying and particularizing his bestowals, yet preserving the distinctive character of his proper nature." So this proposition is focused on the immanence of the gods. To unfold this idea, Proclus is drawing from Proposition 62, and if I scroll a little down, you can see Proposition 28 as well. So let's take a look at those. 62 reads that every manifold which is nearer to the one has fewer members than those that are more remote, but is greater in power. It's short, so I'm just going to run through it real quick because this one is significant. That which is near to the one is more like to it, and we know that the one is constitutive of all things without becoming manifold. And so that which is more like to the one, being the cause of more existences, as the one is of all existences, will be more unitary and less divisible, as the first cause is one. The less pluralized is more akin to it as one, and as a universal cause, it's more productive. That means it's more powerful. And so we saw here then that unity is commensurate with power. We've done a lot more with series since our first look at this proposition. So maybe now it's clear that the series which are closer to the one are less divided, and the lower series are more divided. And you see this in the corollary here. It's apparent that bodily natures are more numerous than souls, and souls are more numerous than intelligences, and intelligences are more numerous than divine he-nads. And the same principle applies universally. There is a natural order of series, he-nads, then intelligences, then souls, then bodies, and each subsequent series is more numerous than the one before it. Metaphysically before prior. But we also want to keep in mind that there is still the law of similitude that guides this unfolding, that procession occurs through likeness, and that was Proposition 28. And here we see that every producing cause brings into existence things that are like to itself before the unlike. So with all of this in mind, let's take a look at Proposition 125. And he starts off here. For all procession operating through remission multiplies its first characters in declining to derivative terms. This is stated in a clumsy way, but what he's referring to here is that flow of terms in their series that we saw in that corollary to Proposition 62. But these latter receive a rank in their own order determined by their likeness to their producing causes. That again is procession through likeness. So that the entire procession is in a sense one and identical, although that part which proceeds is distinct from that which remains steadfast, appearing to differ from it in kind because of the remission, but continuous with it and therefore not losing its identity with it, existing as an analog in the derivative order, and so maintaining the unbroken bond of common quality which links the series. So there is some identity that is not lost in this unfolding, and I'm going to come back to that. Each of the gods reveals himself in the modes proper to those orders in which he makes the revelation, and thence proceeds even to the last regions of being. Such is the generative power of first principles. This proceeding even to the last regions of being is the immanence of the gods. I want to focus you now on this phrase in blue, the generative power of first principles. Generative power is a sign of completeness. And so I want to remind you of Proposition 25. Whatever is complete proceeds to generate those things which it is capable of producing, imitating in its turn the one originative principle of the universe. Okay, so this is the law of generation. The more complete participates the good more fully. That is, it is near to the good. And so the gods, being nearest to the good, are strongly generative. They proceed even to the last regions of being. The gods are not absent from any part of the unfolding hierarchy. And it ends with these words, this last sentence. Because the procession is from unity to a manifold, his character is continually multiplied. Yet in the procession, identity is preserved. There's that word identity again. Because of the likeness of the successive terms of each series to its sovereign primordial cause. It's interesting to look at this word identity. It can also be translated as same or as self. There's a certain continuity that runs through the whole unfolding, from the most unitary to the most differentiated. And it's more than just a likeness, it's same or self that runs through all. This dichotomy that we experience between the divine and the earthly is only an appearance. And I'm running out of colors here, but I need to highlight this word because it's an appearance, and that's key. There is something the same that runs throughout. And it is to this something that all of our efforts ultimately focus. We're looking for that identity that runs through the whole. And to know that is to know that sameness that is your own essence as well. And this is what it truly means to know thyself. Well, is your head swimming yet? I think you're going to find that Proposition 126 is much easier to work with. This one reads, a God is more universal as he is nearer to the one, more specific in proportion to his remoteness from it. We see here that he's going to reference Proposition 60 and 61 in the beginning part. We've already seen Proposition 62. That was the idea of power is commensurate with unity. These two, you can guess, are the ones leading up to it. He actually summarizes them nicely here, so I don't see any reason to jump back in the text. So it reads, for the God who causes more numerous effects is near to the universal cause, and he that causes fewer is more remote. And that's Proposition 60. And the cause of more numerous effects is more universal, but the cause of fewer is more specific. That's also Proposition 60. Now, each is a he-nad, but the former has the greater potency, and that would be Proposition 61. The more universal gods generate the more specific, not by division, since they're he-nads, they don't divide, nor by alteration, since gods are unmoved, nor yet being multiplied by way of relation, since they transcend all relation, but they generate from themselves through a superfluity of potency, derivative emanations which are less than the prior gods. So we've seen that relation refers to having a place, so to speak, in the metaphysical hierarchy. The gods transcend their series, though, and so they're able to reach all members equally. They're not closer to some and farther from others. And remember, we've seen before that the ability of the participants to enjoy the providence of the gods is what opens them to distinctions. To understand this last part, I do want to take a quick peek at Proposition 27. This one reads that every producing cause is productive of secondary existences because of its completeness and superfluity of potency. And this one fits nicely with Proposition 25, which I looked at earlier. And that was the one that stated that generative power is tied to completeness. Proclus is clarifying that idea even more, putting together completeness and potency. And this, of course, fits perfectly with that discussion of Propositions 60 through 62. unity being commensurate with power. And so we see here in this last sentence that the gods, because of their completeness and their superfluity of power, they have the power to generate from themselves derivative terms that are lesser in power and so less universal. Well, I covered a lot in this video today. I'm going to end today's video with proposition 127. All that is divine is primordially and supremely simple, and for this reason, completely self-sufficient. So Proclus is taking us back to this idea of self-sufficiency. And it's been a while since we've seen this one. It was defined for us back in Proposition 9. All that is self-sufficient, either in its existence or in its activity, is superior to what is not self-sufficient, but dependent upon another existence, which is the cause of its completeness. And so we see here that the self-sufficient, whatever it is, must be independent. To get a better sense of what it is, we see, I highlighted a few parts here, we see that they have the cause of their good within themselves. And also the self-sufficient is akin to the good, inasmuch as it can furnish its good out of its own being. And so this description fits the gods perfectly. They are goodnesses. They have the cause of their good within them. And by the way, Proposition 10 at the bottom of the page here might make a little more sense now that we have been introduced to the gods. All that is self-sufficient is inferior to the unqualified good. And indeed, we saw that the gods are second in rank to the good itself. And so coming back to Proposition 127, again it reads, all that is divine is primordially and supremely simple, and for this reason completely self-sufficient. That it is simple is apparent from its unity. All deity is perfectly unitary, and that was how we started this discussion of the gods in Proposition 113. And as such, it is simple in an especial degree. That it is completely self-sufficient may be learned from the reflection that whereas the composite is dependent, if not upon things external to it, at least upon its own elements, the perfectly simple and unitary, being a manifestation of the unity which is identical with the good, Proposition 13, is wholly self-sufficient. And perfect simplicity is the character of deity. So being a pure excellence, deity needs nothing extraneous. Being unitary, it is not dependent upon its own elements. There's a series of the one and the gods. And so the gods are onenesses, but since the one and the good are the same, these onenesses are also goodnesses. And we saw that in Proposition 119, that we can call the gods pure excellence because they are goodnesses. Now the word unity, by the way, can be understood in two ways. It can be used synonymously with single, or it can mean the coming together of two or more things, like a computer, for example, is a unity of its parts. The way it's being used here is as a single, simple thing. I think that overall this proposition nicely ties together a number of different points about the gods. It's actually a beautiful image to hold on to, and even though it's more straightforward than some of the other propositions, I do recommend spending a little time with it, perhaps because it is so straightforward. It gives you a nice image of the Henads, and it's one that I think is worth contemplating. All right, this was a tough set of propositions. So again, if you have any questions, any comments, you can leave those below. There's an email address in the description box. You can drop me an email. Let me know, anyway, just how you're feeling about all of this. How's it going for you? And also, If you haven't hit the like button, I would appreciate you doing so. It really does help the algorithm. And I do hope that you will join me for the next video. Thank you very much.